is a new Netflix film that was directed and written by Duncan Jones, who previously worked on Moon's source code Warcraft. This film is about him slowly realizing that he might have been a one-trick pony with Moon. I really enjoyed Moon, actually. I think that's a really fantastic film. I'd never seen Source Code, but I thought Moon was phenomenal. When I saw Warcraft, I was like, okay, he's stated that he's a fan of this series, this video game series, so this clearly is a fan's perspective on what the movie should be, but there must be some studio meddling getting in the way, because I wasn't a big fan of Warcraft. I thought it was kind of mediocre and just kind of bland. But I figured that must be just some studio stuff getting in the way. It is a big tentpole movie, after all. Now he's on Netflix making a film called Mute, which is a spiritual successor to Moon, he stated. Like, there's one reference to Moon in this film. It takes place in the same world, so I was pretty excited to see what else he can do. Netflix was going to allow him to make the movie he wanted to make, which is what was taking so long for this movie to get made. So I was very excited to see how this film would turn out, because I think Duncan Jones can make some pretty incredible stuff like Moon was. Unfortunately, Mute is just so generic, long, boring, and kind of derivative. Alexander Skarsgård plays Leo. He is the mute lead character. He can't speak whatsoever. He has to do a lot of acting with his facial expressions and widening his eyes. And I thought his performance was fine in this movie. He has to do a lot without speaking, obviously, and that's gotta be tough, so I gotta give him full credit for that. He's able to convey a lot of emotion through his face, so that's cool. My main problem with him is the character. I don't buy why he's mute in a future where apparently you can cure if you're mute. Like, you can get like a voice box or something and you can start speaking. But he's Amish, so that means he can't have any tech like around surrounding him whatsoever. But he lives in a city that's completely teched out, like it's the future. He lives in the city, but he doesn't have like an advanced phone. He doesn't know how a lot of the machinery works, and he can't get the operation to make him speak again. Like, that's the thing I don't buy, is like, if you're actually Amish living in this future, why aren't you literally out in a field? Like, if you want to be away from technology and you don't care for it, why are you actually here? Like, that's the one thing I really can't buy about this character, and it's a bigger problem that I have with the world itself involving the script for this movie, is that visually, it looks pretty good. It's not like the most incredible thing I've ever seen or anything. It does copy other sci-fi stuff that we've seen before. Like, even Netflix recently released their own Blade Runner-esque show called Altered Carbon, which has a lot of similar sci-fi elements that we've seen before. So Mute isn't doing anything that new with its world, but it does look pretty good for a Netflix movie. The visual effects are pretty good, and the costume design is pretty neat, and the sets are really cool to look at. I will give Duncan Jones credit that he did craft an interesting world that I would like to explore. Leo, when he's traveling around the city, he goes to some places, some that are cool, some that are kind of weird, but it's pretty interesting, and I wanted to see more of it. But my main problem with the plot of the film is that it takes place during the future when it doesn't really need to be. Like, aside from one thing near the end of the film, there's really nothing much that proves why this film needed to be set in the future. You know what I'm saying? Like, this whole plot, I was imagining, like, I can see this taking place in present day, maybe even a little bit in the past too. So why this is in the future, I'm not really sure. And going back to the Blade Runner series, Blade Runner and 2049, those movies kind of do have to take place in the future. Like, that's what they're all about. It has to be set there, and you can't see it being set anywhere else. This movie, however, if you just changed like the entire backdrop of the city, just made it an ordinary present day or maybe a little bit past city, then nothing really changes that much, you know what I mean? So besides the fact that it does look pretty good and the visuals are pretty top-notch for a Netflix property, this just doesn't really need to be there. So immediately I was disengaged, like, okay, why does this need to be in the future? I don't really see why. I do want to give credit to this actor, though, Paul Rudd as Cactus Bill. He is technically the bad guy of this movie, but he's not really a bad guy. Like, he has a daughter and he's doing a lot of bad stuff, but he's doing it to make sure that she is okay. And overall, you don't want to like this character because he is the bad guy. Like, technically, he is the main villain. But there is something about Paul Rudd's approach to this character that adds a lot of humanity to him. Like, he could have just been a generic bad guy, but there's a human in there. A human who's done a lot of messed up stuff, but he just wants a better life for him and his daughter, so it's a kind of conflicted appreciation that I have for the character. I hate him because he's a bad guy, but he's got a daughter, and he's doing stuff for her, and he wants to take care of her. And it also helps that Paul Rudd is easily, like, the most charismatic in this film. Like, he's got a lot of funny moments in this movie, despite him being a bad guy, so that was pretty cool. He is definitely the most likable character. And then you have his partner, Justin Theroux, playing, what's his name, Duck? Not a fan of Justin Theroux in this movie, and I have a huge appreciation for Justin Theroux as an actor. I think he's great. This movie, however, I can understand wanting to do something different, and the character he's playing is something different for him. He is, in the future, working with Paul Rudd, doing some bad stuff, and he's also a pedophile, the added character trait of that. The way they handle it, though, it's almost as if they were, like, just making it like a funny quirk, instead of, like, something that's actually, like, really terrible. There's one scene where Paul Rudd is, like legitimately pissed at him because Justin Theroux works at, like, this doctor's lab, and Paul Rudd finds out that he's taking video of, like, these young girls, and he's like, dude, what are you doing? And, like, talking to him that way, saying that's really messed up. But then the scene kind of ends with him going like, it's alright, I forgive you, I'm gonna give you a hug now, let's go to the mall to cheer us all up. And they just go to the mall after that, and they act like nothing just happened. And that's the approach they take with that character trait of pedophilia. And they don't do anything, like, interestingly dark with it, just it's there to be there. And it doesn't have a place here at all. Like, the writing here just feels so, like, very generic. Like, we gotta add this dark element here because, I don't know, why not? It makes the character more interesting, I guess. We gotta make sure it takes place in the future because this movie's pretty boring, so I guess maybe some people might be interested in the background going on. And that's something I did want to point out about this movie, is that I think this wasn't originally supposed to be set in the future. I think that this was just a movie where a mute guy, his girlfriend goes missing, and he has to go around and find her in a, like, very detective-like manner, even though he's not a detective. But I think Duncan Jones realized, like, man, this story is really boring. I think people are going to be immediately disengaged. So let's have it take place in the future, you know, do it like a Blade Runner thing, might as well. I can't prove that that's what actually happened, but after watching the movie, it's hard to really imagine why it takes place in the future, other than we had to make the story somewhat more interesting. And like I said, the future elements are cool. I just wanted to explore the world a little bit more. But a main problem I have with this movie is that they barely explore the world, and it does nothing to solidify itself as to why it needs to be set in the future. And it's just led by this guy who's doing fine performance-wise, but whose character is just something that I could not buy in this world. And I could follow Cactus Bill well enough. Paul Rudd, I think, does a very good job. Maybe it should have just been his movie, but you also have him working with Justin Theroux, and Justin Theroux's character kind of brings down a lot of what they're trying to do with Paul Rudd. There is a point in this movie where I thought it was going to end, and I was like, this is really dark, really messed up. If you end it here, I will actually give you props, because I did not expect you to end it in this very dark, depressing way. And I was gonna give it credit for doing something just completely, like, manic and terrible. But then it goes on for another 15 minutes or so because they needed to have a happy ending. And at that point, it felt like it was just kind of tacked on, and it just made the movie drag on even more. And I was like, oh, come on. If you had just ended it 15 minutes ago, we wouldn't have gotten a happy ending. And it doesn't really change what we've seen before this ending, but I at least would give you credit that you ended it unlike any other film out there right now. Instead, they just go on more boring 15 minutes to get a climax, and so we can have a happy ending for Leo. Yay! I can't really say that I hate this movie because Duncan Jones is clearly passionate about making this sci-fi futuristic world, and I do think it's a neat place to see. Like, visually it's very good. I wouldn't say stunning, it's not like amazing, but for Netflix it looks very good. And Paul Rudd's character, I think this should have been his movie. It would have been much more interesting, I think, if we just followed Paul Rudd's character, someone who's conflicted emotionally all the time. You want to like our main character, but then he does something completely terrible and you're like, I don't know if I want to follow you anymore. But it keeps kind of flip-flopping. I think that would have been a much more interesting film, but for some reason we have this Amish mute guy who lives in a futuristic city looking for his girlfriend, even though their chemistry was barely even there to begin with. Like, I didn't even buy into their relationship at first. Why should I care that he's looking for her now? And I don't want to discourage Duncan Jones from making any more movies. I don't want that to happen because I think he is a very talented dude, and clearly he has some great ideas as presented in this film, but it doesn't have the right execution. I hate to say this about any big Hollywood filmmaker right now because I assume Mute must have cost a lot of money. But I'm thinking maybe Duncan Jones should just stick with low-budget stuff. Like, Moon is relatively very low-budget, although it is set on the moon. And even though I haven't seen Source Code, I have seen now Warcraft, which let me down. I thought it was really mediocre. And now Mute, which is very disappointing to me, even more so than Warcraft, and even worse than Warcraft, honestly. And I'm just thinking, is Duncan Jones just one of those directors that should just work with low-budget films and not try to dabble in the bigger budgeted stuff? Should he be a filmmaker who challenges himself by having these lower budget projects instead of receiving a ton of money from the studio so he can do whatever he wants? It's just something interesting to think about. Also, this is a spiritual sequel to Moon, I guess, because there's one scene where Sam Rockwell shows up on TV with a bunch of clones from Moon, so I guess that's still going on. I don't know why it has to be set in this Mute universe now. So if they do make a sequel to Moon, I think I heard about that somewhere, them actually making like a direct sequel to Moon. If they do, I guess it's gonna be set in this world. Okay, like, I'm kind of beyond caring about this movie at this point. I'm gonna give Mute a C-. I do want to give it credit for some of its direction and its world building at times, and Clint Mansell, I think, did a pretty solid job with the score, but I think there's a lot of disappointing elements as far as its story, as far as fleshing out the world, as far as its characters. When Paul Rudd, who is technically the villain, is the most likable one, then you got a problem there, bud. But if you've seen Mute, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.